Okay, welcome everybody that's just joined. We just hung out a little bit in the realm of the spirit. We had a little 1-minute meditation. Welcome everybody. We're on page 58, chapter 5, how it works. How it works. There's a beautiful promise. And this is something that if you attend a lot of, in my instance, a lot of face-to-face meetings, this is usually on the wall or on a piece of laminated paper on the table, and it is pretty much read at every meeting I've attended face-to-face here in South Africa. And tonight I hope that we can shine a light on some of these repetitive sentences that we've heard, and maybe, just maybe, we can help you see something totally different. So in the beginning of the meeting, we ask God to set aside everything we think we know, because actually the whole deal here is to let go of old ideas and to have a new experience with God and this book. Let's see. Welcome. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this simple program. Usually men and women who are constitutionally incapable of being honest with themselves. They are such unfortunates. They're not at fault. They seem to have been born that way. They are naturally incapable of grasping and developing a manner of living which demands rigorous honesty. Their chances are less than average. There are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders, but many of them do recover if they have the capacity to be honest. Sure, what a load. I don't know, Bill. I think we might just stay on this paragraph all night long and be here another month. There's so much in this paragraph. First of all, they kick off this paragraph with a promise. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. There's tons of instructions in this book, so you don't need to be confused about what the path looks like. And rarely have we seen a person thoroughly follow our path. That's also a sad truth in these rooms. Those who do not recover, here's a warning. So those who do not recover are people who cannot or will not completely give themselves to this program. I was cannot, and I was a will not. I just couldn't do this program because I didn't have the willingness. I thought that I still had a little bit of drink in me. I thought I wasn't an alcoholic. I was maybe I didn't have the problem like you guys. I wasn't as bad as you. And I was a will not. They told me to get a sponsor. I will not. They told me to do the 12 steps. I will not. I'll just do it my own way, and I'll come to meetings and I'll stay sober one day at a time. That's what, so I've been in that. And what? It's a simple program. It's a simple program. It's easy. It's not easy. And there is a lot of self-sacrifice here, and there is work, because what does this chapter say? How it works. There's a lot of work involved in here. But then Bill, and I want you to also just there's 3 times that the word honest is mentioned in this paragraph. 3 times. Again, the writers, the 100 that came together, they make no bones about what is needed in this program. Remember, and I'm going to reiterate it again, if we go over to the spiritual appendix, the spiritual experience, appendix 2, on page 568. As a newcomer, as a sponsor sitting with a prospect across them, as a relapser who keeps going out and doing what we do, we drink, we use, and coming back in, or as someone who's been in the program a very, very long time and they're living on page 52 and they're at the jumping off point because they can't live with alcohol or without alcohol, there are only 3 things that you need to bring to the table. The rest is up to God. 3 things you need to bring to the table. And it's, what is it? They're indispensable. Number 1, I can't give it to you. I can't. In COVID, we had hand sanitizers and we were dispensing sanitizer all over the place. I can't put honesty in a bottle. I can't put open-mindedness in a bottle, and I cannot put willingness in a bottle and dispense it to you as much as I want to. As much as I want to give this freedom that I feel to you, as much as I want to bottle it and give it to you, I can't. Unless you bring to the table, newcomer, unless you bring to the table, relapser who keeps coming back in and out, unless you bring to the table, meeting maker who's been sitting around not understanding why the meetings aren't working anymore. Bring to the table honesty, open-mindedness, and willingness. It's there on page 568. This second last paragraph, it says, we find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of this program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. We can't give that to you. We can definitely shine a light and show you which pedal to stand on, which paving, which step to take, how to take the steps. We can do that for you, but I can't do those three things. And a nice way to test these three essentials in your newcomer or whoever's sitting across you that's come to ask you for help is ask them about their lives. Let them get honest. Ask them about sex, meds, and checks, where they're at in their partner, where they're at in their relationships. Let's hear how much they tell you. Ask them what medication they're on. Let's hear how much they tell you. And ask them what financial situation they're in. That's a good kind of honesty test. The next one is a willingness test. Set your dates. Meet with them every second or third day. If they're showing up, that's willingness. That's willingness ticked off the box. They're bringing it to the table. And open-mindedness, you're going to talk a lot about God in this program. A lot about God. Whether you're using God, love, universal creator, whatever. Spiritual intelligence, creative intelligence, the list goes on ad nauseum. But we're going to be talking a lot about someone who's God, who's not you, newcomer. Are you? And if they're cringing and they're like, no, not for me, I don't know about the open-mindedness. Because all we're asking you is just say maybe. Just say maybe. So, yeah, Bill, in the beginning of this chapter, makes no bones about the word honesty. And I can tell you something. Honesty does not come naturally to me. It doesn't come naturally to me. I will lie about what my name is. If given half a chance. So, yeah, you're going to have to ask them to start praying for the serenity prayer, pray for honesty, even if they just say, God, give me, because this is something we're going to need a lot of help with, is a measure of honesty. Another thing I want to point out here, it says, their chances are less than average. Again, that's not a very good number. Less than average. Do you know what the averages are in AA when this book was written? It was 75% recovery rate. 50% got sober at once when they sincerely took a position. Another 25% after coming in and out and deciding whether they wanted the program. 75% was our success rate. Today, the success rate in the rooms of recovery, they call themselves 12-step rooms, but there ain't no books on those, is 0.08. Now, if that's the average, your chances are less than average. Man, odds are not great. And then the other thing is, it says here, there are those who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. Let's go look at what are those mental disorders. They're actually been outlined and identified in the doctor's opinion on Roman numerals XXX. That's Roman numerals XXX, page 30, for those who don't speak Latin. The little trick is to number those numbers. With Roman, I think, is it Roman numerals, Rob? Am I speaking correct English here? It's always easy to reference back to them. Roman numerals XXX. It details it here. It's the third paragraph. The classification of alcoholics seems most difficult, but we have the psychopath, we have the manic depressive, we have able, intelligent, friendly people. We have, and if you go back one page, we've got people who are in full flight from reality. We've got people who are, where's the other word? Outright mental defectives. And then at the bottom of page 28, Roman numerals XXVIII, we have the restless individual, the irritable individual, the discontented individual. Those were old school languages for OCD, ACD, ODHD, AHD, OCD. The list goes on and on. The list goes on and on. Are you jumping in, Bill?
Yes, I am an alcoholic. My name is Bill. Unlike my counterpart, Nadia, I haven't interviewed every alcoholic that ever came to AA. So I'm not so sure that I'm going to discount the power of this movement. There's a qualification in the forward to the second edition about the aggregate of recoveries, and one of them was that those that came and really tried, 50% got sober at once and stayed that way. Of the remainder, half of the other half, or 25%, has been alluded to. After they got hurt and realized they met the conditions, they came and stayed, and the other 25% showed improvement. Alcoholics Anonymous is a household name now. We've talked about that. Someone smokes marijuana in junior high and their parents send them to treatment, they have nowhere to send them but to AA. What that ostensibly does is taints the numbers, but not in reality. Because of those that come to AA and really try, I'm pretty sure the numbers would be about the same. Unfortunately, not all of us were as desperate. I was thinking about what they talk about, and I believe there is a solution with all the desperation of drowning men. If I'm not drowning, guess what? Don't come and rescue me, because I'll probably push you under for me to get some buoyancy in the water. Now, getting back to chapter 5 that I've had my little piece. Welcome to the newcomers here, the people who have not been here before. It's a wonderful book study. We've been doing it for 6 years, and we're just now beginning chapter 5, so stay with us. If you've got nothing to do on Mondays, it's a good place to come. I used to think, because in the word incapacity and incapable, because they all had the CAP in the middle, both of them, I thought they kind of meant the same thing, and they do not. The incapable means I don't have the ability, but I looked up the word capacity to be clear, and what it says is the maximum amount that something can contain. If I don't have the capacity to be honest, it means I have nowhere to hold truth. When we're going to get into this is a description of the action taken by the people who wrote the book. This is past tense, these chapters. And sometimes what we do is we think we're the part of the we because we come to AA meetings and say, oh, it's a we fellowship. It's a we program. Well, when I went to jail, we didn't go with me. We said, we'll see you when you get back. Until I do the work, I'm not part of the we. And what it's telling us here is in step 4, what I'm doing is I'm identifying what I have the capacity to hold, which is resentment, fear, and harms done to others. If those don't get remedied or removed, there's no room for truth to come inside of me, and I can remain dishonest in my abstinence. So it's critical what they're telling us. This whole thing's leading us to a point where we invite God to take his rightful place in our life. But we got to make room for him. If I'm going to have you come over my house for dinner and I invite 30 people, well, in my case, I wouldn't do that. You know what I mean? Because I got a table that sits one. But if I was going to invite 30 people over for dinner and I'm living in a single wide pop-up tent trailer, I don't have the capacity to house or to host 30 people. If I invite 30 people over for dinner and tell them I don't need to bring anything, and I'm living on food stamps at a very low level, I don't have the ability, I'm incapable of hosting 30 people. 2 different animals, but both of them demand merit. And what says constitutionally means in my nature. In my nature, if I'm born constitutionally incapable, this was a revelation, I could be wrong, but it means that God made me that way. I wouldn't have a chance unless I read a few pages forward. When I get to step 3, guess what it says? You get a rebirth, Bill Swan. You get to be reborn, and maybe this time you will be granted the capability or capacity to be honest. This is big stuff here. This is all leading to the manufacturer because the item is defective. We go back to the manufacturer. Like my sponsor says, the car doesn't fix itself. That's why we take it back to the dealership when there's a defect or a recall. That's enough for me for now. I'm wound up today. This could get interesting.
I feel you. We're heading over to page 63, the terms of our employment contract. I get super excited about that. Little HR quarterly check-in KPI. Thanks. All right, let's get back to the book. Let's speak big book. Here we go. Our stories disclose in a general way what we used to be like, what happened, and what we are like now. That is a double-barreled sentence. It's so awesome. It's an instruction for those who are asked to share. I hope you always say yes, because it's through our testimony, through our experience, strength, and hope that we help the newcomer. They're still suffering. So we say yes when we are asked to share at a meeting, do a live share, get our names all blinged up on those flyers. Maybe not. It doesn't matter. That's not what's important. What is important here in this little sentence is they tell you how to share. A lot of people will phone me, a lot of my sponsors, and I'll go, I've been asked to share. What do I do? And I'm like, first of all, you pray, right? And secondly, we hop on over to page 58. It tells us we disclose in a general way. The rooms are not safe. We don't do step 5s in there. We don't get told about our rapes and gang rapes and the sex tapes. And we disclose in a general way what we used to be like. So give them a little bit of your war stories. We've all got the same stories. Then you tell them what happened. What did rock bottom look like? And you say, and you tell them what we are like now. What is your life like now? What does that relationship with God look like now? Because ultimately that's what you got to be talking about, is your relationship with God. And the second part about that sentence is, who are they talking about when they say our stories? Like Bill said, we are reading the experience of those first 100 got together and wrote this book. What are they talking about? They are talking about Bill's story, chapter 1. They're talking about the carpet slipper dude. Well, he's been lovingly dubbed that now, but he's the man of 30 in More About Alcoholism. The man who thought that maybe if he committed to his career, he could drink safely after he'd been sober for a couple of decades. We're talking about Jim, and we're talking about the used car salesman, and we're talking about Fred, who took a drink when there wasn't a cloud in the horizon. That's what they're talking about when they say our stories. If you have decided you want what we have and are willing to go to any length to get what we have, then you're ready to take certain steps. Now we stop the newcomer right there, the prospect, the one sitting across you. Are you done for good and for all? Are you? Yes. Great. We've declared, we've gone through More About Alcoholism. We've gone through Bill's story. We've looked at the prejudice around the word God, because we're about to give our lives over to this unseen, visible force. But I want you to this is just something that was done with me once. Are you willing to go to any lengths? Go to the front of the book and write the date and your signature. I know temperance pledges don't mean for nothing with us Alkies, because we cannot recall with sufficient force the promises that we make. But that is really something powerful for me to go back on my, when I'm facing up to my sobriety date, because my sobriety date is not the date I took this promise. So I was in these rooms a while, dry as a bone. But it was when someone took me through this work that the lights came on for me. The other thing that I want to also highlight here, and I'm going to get a little bit mouthy and evangelical about this, is it says here, are you willing to go to any lengths? Guys, it's going to go on to say that half measures, any lengths, that's the same thing. If we don't go to any lengths, like I did for my drugs, like I did for the men, like I did for the alcohol, the result will be nil. Again, not a very good statistic. Nil, no recovery, no joy, nil, none of the promises. Sorry, you're sitting in the rooms and you're like, why is nothing happening? Are you going to any lengths? I love this. Listen to this. This is amazing. I always read this for almost 10 years of being in and out of these rooms. The next sentence, listen, I'm gonna hopefully shed some light and blow your mind. Put on your seatbelt. At Sotheby's, they're talking about the steps because they say, yeah, you're ready to take certain steps. You're ready to take certain steps, steps 1 through to 12. We're about to identify them and discuss them and flesh them out a little bit. But it says here, at some of these steps, we balked like a donkey. They just stop and they ain't going forward. They're not moving. You can push, you can smack, you can prod. They're not moving. Anybody out here who's ever farmed with cattle, the cow decides she ain't moving, good luck. You're not going nowhere with that animal. We thought we could find an easier, softer way. So some of us maybe disappear off to church and we don't come back to AA. We think we can find an easier, softer way. Maybe if I just pray this away and be a good little church girl on Sunday, I don't need those AA folks. I don't need to do what they do. Or maybe we take out another gym contract. We think that's an easier, softer way, but I don't need to go to AA. Really? Guess what? We thought we could find an easier, softer way. This is the easier, softer way. This is it. That's what they're saying there. We thought we could find an easier way. We thought we could find a softer way. There's not an easier, softer way than this one. There isn't, because all the others end up in pitiful, incomprehensible demoralization. The gates of insanity or death. But we could not. So let's stop. Did you guys try an easier, softer way? Are you still in these rooms here, right here with us, thinking of an easier, softer way? I tried. I don't know. If it works for you, awesome. You don't need to do the things I do. That's amazing. With all the earnestness at our command, we beg of you to be fearless and thorough from the very start. What's that? That's now. They're going to talk about now in another 2 sentences. Now, let's do this. Let's get fearless. Let's get thorough now. Like Bill said, with the desperation of a drowning man or woman. Some of us have tried to hold on to our old ideas. But sorry, if you're going to hold on to them old ideas, the result will be nil. We have to let go. Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go see where else they talk about this in the book. Page 27, the 3rd paragraph. Page 27, the 3rd paragraph in the chapter called There is a Solution. Here's some more reference to what hanging on to old ideas looks like. So they flesh this out a little bit more for us. They say here in that 3rd paragraph, in the middle of the paragraph, they say, they're talking about the spiritual experience. They appear to be in the nature of huge emotional displacements and rearrangements. Here it is. Ideas, emotions, and attitudes, which were once the guiding forces of these men, are suddenly cast to one side. So let's think about that for a second and maybe ask the newcomer across you or the prospect across you, what are some of the ideas that have been driving you? Let's go back to that bull farming, cattle farming analogy that I had earlier. You know those rings in the noses where you got to lead them out of the pen and in and out? Or maybe you got to block the little calf from drinking from his mother. They get a ring around their nose and you can lead them away from the mum with that. What ideas have been leading you around the bull ring? What thoughts, what emotions has been leading you, blacking you out, and you wake up and you're like, you've been crying for days, sleeping on your couch, thumb sucking in your dirty nappy for days because of self-pity, grief, prejudice. I don't want none of this God thing. I don't know. Let's look at some of that stuff. And we're going to look at some of that stuff pretty soon because we're going to head over into inventory and we're going to head over into step 5. And this is, I'm not even going to give you any warning. I'm telling you, that's what's going to happen there. That is what happens in step 4 and step 5. We get to look at the whole mountain of old ideas, emotions, and thoughts that have been driving our lives. Remember, and that's why we read this at every meeting, because we forget. The cat comes home, the dog starts licking us again, mom starts picking up our phone calls, the kids come back, social workers are off our back, and we forget. Because why? We have that strange mental blank spot. We forget. So we ask you, we remember, we deal with alcohol, cunning, baffling, and powerful.
If I want to jump in there before we get too far into this program of recovery, I'd like to back up a couple paragraphs, if I may. What's the importance of them telling us that there are those too who suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders? What's the point? If they make clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic, and they do that several times, the doctor's opinion tells us that we have the allergy, and if we've had it once, if we've ever had it once, because it never occurs in the temperate or non-alcoholic, if we've ever had it once, we have the physical component. Chapter 4 says if when we honestly want to and can't, because something in our mind compels us to always take the first drink, setting the cycle in motion, that we have this thing called alcoholism. Why are they breaking out the difference between someone who is an able, intelligent, friendly person and someone who's schizophrenic? Number one, I might not want to be bothered with that type of person and think that they really have no redeeming value anyhow. Let psychiatry deal with them. And number two, because the fellowship initially was the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant, at least that's what they represented. You're going to wear a shirt, you're going to come to the meeting. And then what they found out is people with problems other than alcohol were showing up in AA, but they met the qualifications for alcoholism. They couldn't afford to be turned away. It's very important because guess what? Most of us suffer from grave emotional and mental disorders. We don't like to admit it any more than we want to admit we're alcoholic. But I've met very few able, intelligent, friendly people here in AA, although most of us think we are. Give us about 30 days and the circus comes to town, you'll know what we're dealing with. Next, we go into our stories, as you said, disclosed in a general way. If you have decided, who decides? You decide, the person reading the book. We assume that everyone's coming to a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous, but when the book was written, there wasn't too many of those. If you have decided, you're the one who makes the decision that you want what we have. It's not incumbent upon you to figure out what we have. It's incumbent on us to let you know. And in chapter 2, they tell you exactly what we have. Nadia, you like to cross-reference the book. We have had deep and effective spiritual experiences which have revolutionized our life from what you were talking about, attitudes, ideas, and beliefs. They no longer exist. They're cast to the side. A vision for you talks about an alcoholic, because Nadia said this, if you're done for good and for all. And my question to you, Nadia, is this: have you a sufficient substitute? And you'll say, well, I'm glad you asked, Bill Swan. Let's go to chapter 11. We have a sufficient substitute. We have a fellowship in Alcoholics Anonymous. And then we enter into a fellowship of the Spirit. Totally different animal, because I can only stay sober so long and rub shoulders with people until the nerve of self begins to grow again, and you start to bristle against them and you start to annoy me. You're starting to get on my last nerve. And the reality is I need relief from that. And if I can't find it in something other than fellowship, other than society, other than people, by the nature of the disease, I turn back to the drink. It's not personal. It's not intentional. It's by the very nature of this disease. Something inside of my mind compels me to jump back into the abyss after I've been pulled out over and over and over again, whether I want to or not. And once I get into the abyss, I set up camp, I pitch a tent. I want to stay there because it looks like I'm having more fun than when I'm outside of the abyss, until the abyss gets so painful. Then I find myself outside again. And if you don't have something to remedy the internal spiritual malady, the bedevilments that we talked about in the preceding chapter, or the four horsemen that are trampling through my life, there's no hope for a guy like me. I have a little revelation I'd like to share. It's not really a revelation. You guys knew it a long time ago, but it's a revelation to me once I get it. Chapter 4 tells me where to find the power. Chapter 5 tells me how to access the power. Chapter 6 tells me how to ignite the power. And chapter 7 tells me what to do with the power once it's accessed and ignited. This is an amazing continuum. But guess what? At some of these we balked. Half measures is ready to read, avail us nothing. First 6 steps avail me nothing. What? They avail me nothing. They give me some promises. There's some landmarks, mile markers on the road telling me you're headed towards the world of the spirit. But guess what? If you stop now, you don't get there. And once you get there, if you stop doing it, you don't stay there. This is an amazing storybook. It's a love story to remedy a lifetime illness. All I have to do is take my daily prescription. It's like a daily vitamin. When I'm getting ready to run out, I better go get a refill. In Alcoholics Anonymous, when I start to let up on the program of action, I better go to the pharmacist because I'm in trouble. I'm headed for trouble if I don't. Just wanted to catch up on those 2 paragraphs before you got way ahead of me. Now you're in rare. I think it's a full moon over there.
I love that.
Love you.
I love that. Thank you so much. Where's the power, how to access the power, how to ignite the power, and how to use the power. Thank you. Yes, because that's what this is about. This is about these guys that are in this room that are fully armed with the facts, who are taking people through the work. All they're doing is they're brokering all the finger and God's finger, and they're accessing the power for you. That's it. And then they're pushing you out into the world to go and use that power, to go and speak cave to the still sleeping brothers and sisters that are out there who are suffering from this disease. It's only us that speak that language. That's the privilege we get. And we get to keep it by giving it away one day at a time, contingent on our daily reprieve and our spiritual maintenance, the maintenance of our spiritual fitness. One for 24 hours. That's all we're asking you to do. Let's look at the meaning of some of these words that describe our cunning, powerful, patient, baffling foe, alcohol. Cunning, some words to describe cunning: crafty, wily, deceitful. That sounds like me in my cup. Baffling, some words to describe perplexing, difficult to understand. We've tried to understand why we have this disease. Our family can't understand why we drink the way we do. We couldn't understand why we drink the way we do at the expense of our children, our marriages, our jobs, our homes, our savings, our health. Baffling, powerful, a great force, high-powered, influential. It's not a little kindergarten foe, this. And then there's a word that Bill should have put in there. He should have put in there patient. Because if you go back to more about alcoholism, that man of 30, 25 years later, when he picked up the bottle, he was off to the races. And the progressive nature of this disease in full force, it was patient, like a hungry lion outside prowling, waiting to devour one of us, leave the fold. Without help, it is too much for us. We are beyond human aid. But don't worry. That was a sucker punch, but here's the good news. There is one who has all power. That one is God. Where do we find him? May you find him now. So let's all take a nice, big, fat, juicy, deep breath right down to the soles of our feet. That's all you got to do. That's all you got to do. Just a nice deep breath. Just tap into the present moment. There's no worry there. There's no anxiety. There's no court cases. There's no prison sentences. There's no patrol officers. Nothing in this now present moment. That's where we find God. That's just an instruction. Here it goes. Here's another warning. Half measures. No half measures. Willing to go to any lengths. Avail us nothing. No results. Nothing. We stood at the turning point. We asked his protection and care with complete abandon. I love that sentence so very much. When that sentence was read to me by my first sponsor, she said to me, Nadia, look at that. God is protecting and caring. And I looked at her, I said, what? I never ever put those two adjectives with him. The God I knew is punishing, conditional, grumpy, filming my every move, doesn't listen to my prayers, doesn't bring me my red bicycle at Christmas. And yeah, my sponsor is inviting me to find a God that offers me his care and his protection. Wow. And that's not the first time that we get asked to consider those qualities for our higher power. Here are the steps we took. Those first 100, which was suggested as a program of recovery. Now I'm going to tell you something. When you hear in the rooms that the 12 steps are just a suggestion, sorry, fake news. This is the last time that they use the word suggested. This is the program of recovery. They are suggesting it, and that's the last time they suggested. After this, the word must. The word must comes right in, and then it's no longer a suggestion because you're at the turning point. You're taking these steps.
Yes, mate. I didn't realize the thumbs up meant come in, but I got it figured out now. You've done that 3 times. I only caught it twice. So what are our old ideas? And we're getting ready now to get into the instructions, and which is actually the 12 steps that we're going to read probably today. We'll probably get there. Maybe not. But it's a description. Again, it's a description of the action taken by the people who wrote the book. Step 1 is spelled out in chapter 3. We learned. We needed some information because not everyone was at a meeting this morning. Not everyone coming in here knows what an alcoholic is. They know that they burnt their life to the ground, but they don't know anything about the allergy until we give them that information, like you said. They don't understand about the obsession. They think they changed their mind when they quit drinking and go back to drinking, that they had a change of heart. So what are the old ideas? Certainly some of it comes from chapter 3, that one day I'll be immune to alcohol. That idea's got to be smashed. But didn't they spend the entire chapter 4 talking about the ideas that are killing me? The things that I know for certain that aren't really for sure at all? The beliefs that I have that are keeping me barren from this grace? My prejudices, my ideas, maybe even about God, where he lives, where I'm going to meet him at, what he wants me to do with my life. Maybe every idea I have up until this moment, by the definition of old, is an old idea. What am I willing to let go of? They spend plenty of time telling us in this chapter, don't we let go of an old gadget for something better? We don't question where it came from. They went from a big goofy phone that you carried around in a box, and all of a sudden someone had a cell phone that fit in their pocket. Now it's a computer you walk around with. Now we're on Zoom. I don't question it. I just pop on. I wish I understood it better, but I don't. And even so, it doesn't stop me from getting on here. So what old ideas, what prejudices, what convictions do I have that are going to stand in the way of a spiritual awakening? In other words, well, what if I lie when it's absolutely necessary or really will serve me best? Well, it's hard to invite the spirit of truth in if you're filling yourself up that cavern, the container, with dishonesty. Yeah, but you don't understand. If I file my tax, the government, I understand you're living in fear, but the fear is brought about because you've been misfiling. Let's trust this new power. There is one who has all the power. They tell us that. They're about to, anyhow, if we ever get there. It doesn't say there are 3 or 4 that have some of the power. This is not multiple choice. And this doesn't go against any other edicts that we come from or what we. There's one who has all power. O Israel, the Lord your God is one. I and the Father are one. There's one who has all power in AA. It's a loving God as he expresses himself in our group conscious that the ultimate authority. There's only one. No one questions that. But the one has a certain nature. And it seems like the way I'm living, the nature of my life is in opposition to the nature of God. I learned a valuable lesson by a friend of mine in Colorado who got a speeding ticket. Suspected she would get out of him because she had her Bible lying on the seat and the state trooper had a little cross on his lapel and she made sure he saw the Bible. He gave her 2 tickets. She looked at him in disbelief. Fellow Christian, what do you... He said, ma'am, if you can't obey man's laws, how do you expect to obey God's laws? I've got to let go of my old ideas, which enhance my old behaviors, which means sometimes I think if I can get away with something, I should do it. No, Bill Swan, that doesn't work. You can easily see why. I think that's the line in the book. Okay, I'm done for now.
I'm calling you back in, Bill. I want you to please, would you do me the grace of going through the 12 steps? Yeah. Step 1, explain it for us, please. I haven't had this opportunity with you.
We won't get done with that. Well, okay, so step 1, if you go to an Al-Anon meeting, the narrative that we read at every AA meeting is identical. And here's the first step in both fellowships. Keeping in mind, Al-Anons may have never taken a drink. We admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. Step 1 in chapter 3 says we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost self. Maybe that unsuspected inner resource that they talk about in the spiritual experience. I'm going to go deep inside of myself. It's beyond surrender. And as Rob will tell you, they don't use the word surrender. Sometimes we like to brag that they don't use a word. And we tell you they don't use a word. Who cares? It may mean the same thing. Throw in the white towel, whatever it is. But we had to concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics. This is the first step in recovery. The unmanageability is not necessarily implied when I'm drinking. See, a lot of times we'll mistake this as a drinking disorder, and although it is when I'm drinking, they tell us that bottles were only a symbol. Alcohol was only a symptom. What are you telling me? It's a big symptom when I'm drinking. On the last day of my drinking, I think it was the only symptom. But now I'm sober. And the bedevilments of alcoholism, the unmanageability, my inability to have a partnership with another human being, to have a healthy relationship. I'm under constant fear and tension. I'm wondering what you're thinking about me all the time. And when I'm not thinking about that, I'm thinking about what I think about me. I'm dominated by self. The unmanageability is this internal spiritual maladjustment to life. My thinking's flawed, but it makes perfect sense to me because it's my thinking. My sponsor explained the unmanageability. He did it best. He was a football coach when the Cleveland Browns were 0-19. That means they lost 3 preseason and blanked for the entire season. He said next year they're going to fire the manager. Step 1 is about me realizing that the guy managing me, my life, has me on a long losing streak that always leads back to a drink. They used to tell me down in St. Pete, you're going to manage your way right back into a drink. I could never figure out what the hell they were talking about because I was sober. What I wanted to do was think that social acceptability equaled recovery. So I get a job, I try and get a girlfriend. I'm still trying 40 years later, but nonetheless, I'm hopeful. I'm still in the game. I want to go to the gym. I want to get an education. I want to know what's God's, and I'm going to join a church. None of that has anything to do with treating the internal spiritual malady, because those are always external things that I'm trying to bring in from without to solve the nature of the disease which is within. It resides in me, centers in my mind, compels me to take a drink where the allergy resides in my body. And I cannot stop with my mind what I start with my body. Powerless over alcohol doesn't mean less power, it means no power. If I'm penniless, I'm broke. If I'm homeless, I'm living outdoors. If I'm powerless, I have no power. And I've learned from you guys who said it much more eloquently than me. Step one doesn't say I can't drink no more. It's a good idea that I don't. What it tells me is without help, I'm going to drink again, whether I want to or not. My experience, more so than anything you could read in this book, tells me that fact. Do I concede to that fact? Or does life become so untenable, sober, that I have to return to a drink? Because one of the prefaces in that book, New Pair of Glasses, and that may be an outside issue, but I brought it up, so now it's on tape. Is it live or is it Memorex? Says that some of us from a position of abstinence, that means not drinking, must drink to preserve our sanity. When they say the problem centers in the mind, I know the obsession exists there. But it's also the storyline, the liar in my head that I believe, not necessarily that this time will be different. I've never believed that. I know it's going to be the same. I'm just hoping it stops before it gets any worse. Is that I start believing the lies in my head, like maybe why Rob's looking over to the left right now. Maybe he doesn't really, he's not interested in what I have to say. And maybe someone muted the camera so they want to go on another meeting and hear someone intelligent. And I start listening to these stories and I start basing major decisions based on what's going on in my head, which is so steep from reality that you might say, I'm one of them people with grave emotional and mental disorders, and why not? Anyone who's drinking themselves to death, that's insane. The sanity that they're talking about restoration to in step 2 has nothing to do with the bizarre consequences of my over drinking. Non-alcoholics can get DUIs. Non-alcoholics taking too much alcohol, getting behind the wheel of a car can kill someone without knowing it. Non-alcoholics with enough alcohol can take off their clothes and dance on a bar, tabletop in a bar. That's drunken behavior that has nothing to do with the insanity of alcoholism. The insanity that needs to be relieved, the sanity I need to be restored to, is the same thing as they use the example in the book, putting my hand in a hot flame. When I was 2 or 3 years old, I stuck one of my mom's bobby pins in a light socket. It blew me halfway across the room. I promise you, I don't stick bobby pins in the light socket. In fact, I have my neighbors come over and plug in the toaster. I don't go near that thing because I'm saying I know that there's more power coming out of that outlet than is within me. But when it comes to alcohol, I've identified that it is a bad idea for me to drink. And eventually I pick up a drink. That's the insanity. Now, here's the other thing about that. As long as we're doing a big book study and we're burning up 2 more minutes till we get the questions and comments from the people who are here and have patiently put up with us. Sanity is not restored till step 10. Granted, we get glimpses of it and we get carried on and we get drawn to that. But they used to say, don't leave before the miracle happens. And I knew that it happened on Sunday. That seemed to be God's favorite day of the week. What would happen is I'd get so angst up on Thursday. By Friday, I couldn't take the story that was going on in my head, and I'd pick up a drink and drink right through the miracle. The coming to believe that the restoration to sanity is possible is the nature of the second step. The restoration takes place after I begin to make amends for the damage I've caused listening to the liar in my head. Some of us come in here and talk about, oh my God, all the promises came true at my second meeting. Well, why do the rest of us have to work so hard to get them? Stop it, I say. You're as delusional as I am. So I think that's enough. We'll deal with 3 through whatever we get to next time, Roger, but I better slow down or I'm not going to be able to make it to my 1:30 meeting.
Thanks, Rob. You can stop the recording. Bill, thanks. That was awesome. Thank you. I can't wait to hear the rest.